or the third component of my presentation. So in this unit, the third unit, I would like to talk of three models of higher education. Two Western models of higher education and one Indian model of higher education. Now, straight away, you would like to ask me, why only three models? Why not four? Why not five? Why not seven? Why not eight? Now, the answer is very simple. There are many models of higher education, but I have chosen to focus on two Western models of higher education and one Indian model of higher education. Now, I have made the choice because, in my opinion, these three models are very significant or highly significant to higher education. And that is why I have chosen these three models. So the first model, I have devoted 2 slides for this particular model. It talks of the Humboldtian model. Okay. So straight away you would like to ask, who is this man? Who is Humboldt? Okay. So you please take a look at this slide. So it is clear he is a Prussian. Okay. His name is Humboldt, born Humboldt. He lived from 1767 to 1835. So his brother also was very famous. His brother's name is Alexander von Humboldt, and he was a naturalist, he was a scientist, whereas we will be talking about his brother, Alexander von Humboldt's brother, Wilhelm von Humboldt. Okay, so look at his specializations. So he has specialized in philosophy, in literature, in linguistics, in anthropology, in education, and political thought. Okay, so these were the specializations of this Prussian, who was also a statesman, who was also a politician, Wilhelm von Humboldt. Now you go back to the first unit or the first segment wherein I talked about the major or the fundamental differences between colleges on the one hand and universities on the other. And I emphasized that the key difference between colleges and universities is this. Universities are supposed to concentrate on research. So which means when you think of a university, the first thing that should come to your mind is research. Now, this was not the case in the 15th, 16th, and the early part of the 17th century. Okay, so in other words, before Humboldt arrived on the scene, particularly in Europe, research was considered subsidiary or ancillary to teaching. In other words, before Humboldt arrived on the scene, universities were looked upon as centers of learning. Of course, there was some research, but research was not the focus. It was only after Humboldt arrived on the scene that the focus changed. There was a shift, and the shift was towards research. Okay, so now please read this quotation. Research intensive universities. Earlier, they were teaching intensive universities. Earlier, the focus was on teaching, and research was an attachment. Research was an appendix. Okay, but now after this man arrived on the scene, the focus shifted. There was a major shift. Universities became research intensive universities, with its central principle being the union of teaching and research in the work of the individual scholar or scientist. So this has become commonplace today. You take any university, whether it is Madras University or Delhi University, whether it is Calcutta University or Jawaharlal Nehru University, all of us take it for granted that being a university, they are supposed to take up research at a high level. But this was not the case before Humboldt arrived on the scene. Earlier, a university was supposed to concentrate on teaching. Now, after this philosopher arrived, after this educationist arrived, research became a key component of university. And if you want a model example of a Humboldtian university, we go to the United States of America. We have this Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore. So that would be the best example in today's context. That would be the best example of a Humboldtian model, because that wonderfully combines teaching and research. Okay. Now, along with Friedrich Schleiermacher. I repeat, along with Friedrich Schleiermacher, who was a German philosopher and theologian. The University of Berlin was founded in 1810. Okay, and Humboldt played a key role along with Schleiermacher, who is considered the father of modern hermeneutics. He was a philosopher as well as a theologian. Now, the Humboldtian model became for Europe the standard model. Okay, so what was special about the Humboldtian model? It synthesized, it blended teaching and research. So it was the union of teaching and research. It emphasized the union of teaching and research. Now, eventually, all universities in Europe, they followed the Humboldtian model. So, wherein teaching and research were synthesized. So, this led to the creation of research universities. And here is a short quote. Humboldt believed that teaching should be guided by current research and that research should be unbiased and independent from ideological, economic, political, or religious influences. The Humboldtian model strives for unconditional academic freedom. In other words, I would like to summarize Humboldtian contribution in one sentence. Earlier, the focus of all universities in Europe was teaching and research was considered ancillary. Now, after this man arrived on the scene, it was a combination of teaching and research was considered a key component of universities. So, dear friends, this is one model, an important model, an influential model. Now, let us turn to an Englishman because he wrote a book called Idea of a University. So the next two slides will be talking about Newman. His name is John Henry Newman. Now I would like to give a few facts about his life. He is an Englishman and he is associated with the Oxford movement. Now, as far as his religious affiliation is concerned, he started off as an Anglican. He was born into an Anglican family. Later, he converted to Catholicism. He became a priest, and later he was elevated to the status of a cardinal. So, therefore, he is called Cardinal Newman. And in 2019, he was canonized. So, today he is Saint Newman. Now, what is interesting about is Newman played a major role. Newman played a major role in the establishment of the University of Ireland. Today it is called the UCD. What is UCD? University College Dublin. So formerly it was known as University of Ireland, Catholic University of Ireland. So Newman played a key role in the establishment of the Catholic University of Ireland. So this university was established in 1854 and he was the rector and he delivered 9 lectures. They are called in 9 discourses. And these 9 discourses have been assembled and put together in the form of a book, and the title of the book is The Idea of a University Defined and Illustrated, and it was published in 1852. Sorry, I have given it as 1850. It was published in 1852. So it contains a series of discourses, 9 discourses. Now the key idea is very simple. Now the question is, what is the job of a university? What is the end of a university? What is the goal of a university? Now we have many answers, but if we ask Newman, what is a university supposed to do? Newman would put it in 2 words. What are the 2 words? Liberal education. In other words, we have, broadly speaking, we have 2 kinds of education. You have liberal education on the one hand, and you have utilitarian or pragmatic education on the other. So what is liberal education and what is utilitarian or pragmatic education? Now, if an education teaches you some skill, if it imparts some training in the use of a particular skill, that would be pragmatic or that would be utilitarian. Today we call it vocational education and training. Whereas a liberal education is that brand of education that aims at broadening one's outlook. Okay. Now, let me quote from Newman himself. Now, in the introduction or the preface, Newman writes, and this is the opening line of the preface to the idea of a university, where Newman explicitly articulates the focus of university education according to him. So he says, the view taken of a university in these discourses is the following, that it is a place of teaching universal knowledge. This implies that its object is on the one hand intellectual, not moral, and on the other that it is the diffusion and extension of knowledge rather than the advancement. To put it in one sentence, the idea of a university is to impart liberal education. Okay, as I said earlier, he gave a series of lectures, a series of discourses, 9 lectures, 9 discourses. They were put together in the form of a book called The Idea of a University. So the 5th lecture or the 5th discourse is called Knowledge Its Own End. Knowledge meant for something else. Okay, so you give training so that somebody can become an engineer. You give training so that somebody can become a carpenter. You give training so that somebody can become a tailor. That is knowledge for something else. So that has a utilitarian value, that has a pragmatic value. But according to Newman, knowledge is its own end. Knowledge is its own goal. Okay, so here is a quote from Newman. So this appears in the 5th discourse. I am asked, what is the end of university education? End here means goal or objective. And of the liberal or philosophical knowledge which I conceive it to impart, I answer, what I've already said has been sufficient to show that it has a very tangible, real, and sufficient end, though the end cannot be divided from that knowledge itself. Then he says, knowledge is capable of being its own end. In other words, Newman was vehemently opposed to utilitarian education. Okay, for him, what mattered was liberal education. So, dear friends, I have given you 2 Western models. The Humboldtian model, which emphasized that university should take up research at a higher level. So that was model 1. And Newman, who insisted on liberal education, not so much utilitarian or pragmatic education, but liberal education. So that was the second model. Now let us turn to an Indian model. We have Mahatma Gandhi. So Mahatma Gandhi's Naitali model. And what is this? He insisted on basic education for all. And the Gandhian model emphasizes that knowledge and work should go together. But before we talk about the Gandhian model of education, let us very briefly talk of the 4 fundamental principles of Gandhian philosophy. The Gandhian philosophy rests on 4 fundamental principles. So what are they? They are Satyagraha, non-violent revolution; Sarvodaya, the progress of all, the welfare of all; Swadeshi, self-sufficiency; and Swaraj, self-governance. So these are the 4 fundamental principles of Gandhian philosophy. So coming to the Gandhian model of education, you go to the last line of my slide. Very interestingly, Gandhiji himself established a university, and that was in the year 1920. So in fact, this is the centenary year for that university. So the original name of that university was Rashtriya Vidyapeeth, but today it is called Gujarat Vidyapeeth, and Gujarat Vidyapeeth is celebrating its centenary because it was founded by Gandhiji on 18th of October 1920. So we are in 2020. So 100 years of Rashtriya Vidyapeeth, and today it is called Gujarat Vidyapeeth. And I am teaching in a Gandhian institution. It is called Gandhigram Rural Institute, deemed to be university. So what is this Gandhian model of education? So once again, we do not have a standard template, but there are four basic principles of Gandhian education. Number one, community work. Community work is very important. You go to Gujarat Vidyapeeth, or if you go to Gandhigram Rural Institute, Gandhigram located close to Dindigul in Tamil Nadu, community work is absolutely indispensable. In addition to community work, Gandhi insisted on manual work. And Gandhi insisted that the medium of instruction should be mother tongue, and Gandhi also insisted on community prayer. Okay. So the question is whether we follow all these in toto, whether it is Gujarat Vidyapeeth or Gujarat Gandhigram Rural Institute, I would say to a very large extent, follow community work, we practice community work, we do manual work, and then we also have community prayer. Of course, we cannot have the medium of instruction in the mother tongue because all universities are supposed to have English as the medium of instruction. So dear friends, I have talked about three models of higher education. I have talked about two Western models, and I have also talked about one Indian model. And that marks the end of the third segment or the third unit of my presentation.